Welcome in, folks, for another episode of What's Bruin. I am your host, Chris Nozick, joined again by Gayle Triani. Gayle, welcome back. Welcome, hopefully, for good. And obviously, we continue to wish the best for Dom as he is out. That does not change. But Gayle, welcome. I think we can say officially to the program. I how are you on this? What are we? Thursday afternoon.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to join you as the co-chair while Dom is out. I always enjoyed our conversations with the three of us and look forward to doing a lot more in the future when he returns. And looking forward to having this program continue to thrive.
I I can't thank you enough for sliding right in, especially so elegantly. From the beginning, I've been blessed to work with incredible co-hosts. First, it was Kevin O'Keefe, Mike Sullivan for a while, Dom, obviously. Um, Genuinely can say because of the folks I've done this show with, I don't have to do a lot of prep work, which is awesome. Because I think even just this afternoon, this morning, kind of preparing for us to sit down, I'm like, we'll go off on conversation so much so that I just have to write bullet points down of like 2 weeks ago, the last time we talked, we went over the press conference. We don't have to rehash that, but now we know we have the seventh overall pick and our head coach search continues. And just on those 2 points alone, we'll probably be able to do the full show. But more will come up, and I love it, which is awesome. So I guess my question to you is, where do you want to start, Miss Co-Chair?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I have some big shoes to fill with Kevin and Dom and Mike, and hopefully I do it justice. That's the first and foremost. Second, I want to start with the most disgusting, reprehensible thing that happened this morning.
I will let you have the floor.
I am beside myself, and I'm happy that I don't have to cover the Ducks. Um, I know that this is met with both. There's going to be a lot of fans that 100% agree with my opinion, and there's going to be other fans that disagree with my opinion, and that's fine. That's 100% fine. I just don't see. First of all, I didn't see how he got reinstated in the first place. And the fact that the Ducks have hired Joel Quenneville as their new head coach is just to me, it's just a culture that needed to be ended and
Yeah.
not brought back into the NHL.
Yeah.
And I don't, it's like I said on Twitter earlier today, I don't see the culture ever changing unless someone that's not part of the boys club becomes the new commissioner when Bettman retires. And I don't see that happening. The only way it happens is if it's a female or if it's someone that literally has nothing to do with the way the league has been run since its inception.
Yeah. The biggest issue I have with it's not one particular finite thing. It's the overall arching problem because we're not the NHL's not addressing it at its core. Similar to how they're trying to not address head trauma and all that stuff to the
Right.
core. It's, we turn a blind eye. We're not hard enough on a particular incident, and therefore things that aren't okay remain okay-ish, and it's the okay-ish part that is the problem. And it's kind of, it's not that Joe Quenneville's getting a second chance at a head coaching opportunity that bothers me the most. Like, it is one of those things where we can have the argument whether people deserve a second chance or not, and what that platform could or should or shouldn't look like. That's a different conversation. The
Right.
problem that we have with the NHL is, simultaneous to this happening, we're also going through a trial up in Canada from 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, for not one person, but an entire group of people, some of which are still in the NHL, and some of which have the conversation to the varying degrees of wrongdoing isn't the point. The point being is we have that incident. The entire Hockey Canada cover up scandal part of it. I mean, to have funds designated that you can pull from to make problems like this problem go away. You shouldn't have problems that you need to make go away. That in of
Right.
itself is the problem. Now, when you run a league like the National Hockey League, you're going to have problems. You're going to have, bad apples as part of it. But right now, we're getting closer and closer to a poisonous tree trunk than we are to just saying it's a few bad apples. And that's the
Well, and
problem.
the bad apples should be the ones that cross the line on the ice ever so slightly. I can think of Chris Simon, like those players that just sometimes took it too far on the ice. You know what I
Well,
mean?
you're going to
It
have
shouldn't be the
problems
stuff.
across the
It
board.
shouldn't be the stuff off the ice. Like there should never be an okay thought to sexual assault. There should
No,
never be an okay thought to sexual assault. And the fact that there's
absolutely
people
not.
out there defending these 5 players that are that are defending Joel Quenneville for turning a blind eye because he didn't want the players distracted from the Stanley Cup playoffs is reprehensible. It's absolutely reprehensible because winning at all costs does not mean that a victim should be ignored.
Absolutely, and that's the problem that we have
I
is
just
it's the
went on a
win at
rant.
all
I'm
cost.
sorry.
No, no, it's fine. It's the win at all cost versus the human aspect of it. And what I mean to say is
Mhm.
like you're going to have bad apples throughout. When you have, I mean, if you consider players, player association, NHL, all the organizations, staff, whatever, you're going to get a few overall bad people who make bad decisions. It's going to happen. You cannot avoid it. If you look at it at a microcosm, though, for instance, just solely the Bruins organization, right?
Right.
I think we can both agree that someone fucked up when they signed Mitch Miller. We can agree someone screwed up. Now, to then pinpoint it was person X, person Y, whatever, that's a whole different conversation. My point is what happens when someone screws up? Now, we don't know publicly what happened with the internal investigation from the third party that they hired to come in and do all that. But the point is from the public perspective, we know someone screwed up. Now, what we need as fans is for the organization to say, someone screwed up, that person's been terminated, it's been handled, and we hope to do better going forward. Here's how we hope to do better. We plan on doing extensive background checks on our players, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can move past that mistake. The problem that we're running into is if you're looking at it from the NHL level, it's not one mistake. It's okay, this mistake. Now we try to cover up the mistake. Now we try to cover up the cover up for the mistake. And it's so compounded that when someone like Quenneville gets a second chance in the NHL, no one cares. No one wants it. No one cares because there's no genuine, hey, we hope to give this person a platform to show that they've learned. Now,
Mhm.
and that's the problem that I have with it. Like, so much of me wants to sit there and say, does he deserve a second chance? Regardless, he's getting one. Okay, so Joe Quenneville, go be responsible and do all the right things, not just behind the scenes, but say and do everything right publicly and show that you've done the hard work, quote unquote, and that you learned from your mistake. You are now a public figure again. I don't want to hear that's in the past. It's not. It's part of what you are now, and you need to own it, regardless of whether you think he deserves a second chance. Personally, I'm glad the Bruins stayed away from it because it's not something they needed, and they're not the ones who should be giving that kind of a second chance. Again, they have their own problems. my attitude has always been this: he was going to get a second chance whether I wanted him to have one or not, because there are other people out there who are going to say, well, XYZ. I don't agree with it, but it's going to happen. And that's where I come down with saying, Joe Quenneville, step up, own it, be better, show it, and that falls on you. You have to show better. That's it. That's all we can hope for.
I don't get, so the only thing I'll disagree with you on is that how do you show the hard work? How do you prove the hard work? You know what I mean? Because if, say
So, for instance, if we're
volunteered
looking,
say he
I was going to say,
volunteered say he volunteered at, like, a a clinic, or, something to deal with sexual assault victims. He can't prove that because that's not public, you know what I mean? So, but even so, just
what he
because you
can
sat there
do,
and listened to people talk doesn't mean you actually learn from it, because I just
what
don't
in
know
his
how you.
instance, what he's able to do is he has a platform. He can say, this is a problem. It's a problem in these ways. We have to acknowledge the problem, and these are some of the solutions that I learned about. He can amplify with his voice what he has learned without saying, these are the people I learned it from. This is, you know what I
Okay,
mean?
and do
Like,
you really
he can,
think, I
do I
don't mean
think
to
he
cut you
will?
off, but do you think that he's going to stand up and say, "This is a problem," about the league that just reinstated him and
I
gave
didn't say
him
he
the
has to say it's
second
a problem
chance?
about the league. I'm not saying he has to say it's a problem with about the league specifically. He can speak on sexual assault in a more general way. He can bring attention to sexual assault by using the platform the National Hockey League is giving him and the Ducks are giving him. He doesn't have to single out his employer and say it's a problem within my employer. He has to be able
I
to.
can Do you
I'm not
believe
saying he
that he
will
doesn't have
either.
a and do you believe that he wasn't given a gag order?
Absolutely not.
Don't talk about it.
Again, I'm
Don't
not
talk
saying
about it.
I agree with the decision to even reinstate him, because that
Right.
comes from the institutional top. What I'm saying is a long time ago, I came to terms with the fact that he was going to get this second chance from somebody.
Yeah.
And so my outlook is, what's the best possible thing to look for, and what's the second best outcome that we can get, aside from the NHL going, nope, you're never allowed back in, because we knew that wasn't going to happen. And so
It
that's
should
why I'm
have.
saying it absolutely should have. And it kind of sort of did with these other five players, but like, it's more or less, yeah, until we figure out what's going. If anything goes wrong with the trial whatsoever, they're give it some time, and they'll be lifted, because they're talented players. Like, who cares? But that's the problem, is we kind of see that outcome coming so far in advance. And it's a systemic problem that until it becomes a no exceptions at all solution, you can't look at exceptions. And that's
Right.
and that's the thing, because we had who was the Lightning player a couple years ago that someone posted some screenshots of accusing one of the players on the Lightning of, I don't remember, I it bothers me that I can't remember who it was. Um, but the Lightning came out immediately and said he's suspended until further notice, and like 48 hours later, everything about it was completely proven wrong, and they were like, we're letting him play again.
Right.
As much as the Lightning bother me, they handled it the way they should have.
Right. And I'm not saying that, like, every player should have a black mark before, that the due process is just as important. You know what I mean? The due process is just
It
as
was Ian
important. But
Cole.
Quenneville, huh?
It was Ian Cole. I just looked it up.
Yes. Yes. Um, but so but what I but they did their due process. They said, "These are the allegations, we're gonna investigate," and it came back and it was false. That's different. That's 100% different, but the Lightning reacted immediately and did their due process.
And that's what I'm saying is that's how it should be handled.
But
And
when they're found at fault, whether
no
it
no
be
more second chance.
no, not with something like this.
Absolutely not.
Like like if if it had gone to trial and he was found guilty of conspiracy to cover up, and now I'm going way out the box here.
Yeah, no,
But
I get where you're going with it. I understand.
but so you know what I mean? Like
The other
like
problem that we have is
that's the problem that I have.
we're never gonna truly know 100% because, as you mentioned,
Right,
gag orders are in effect. Because
right.
from what we've heard and read and what's been reported, if he went to his higher ups and said, "Here's a problem and it needs to be addressed," and they were told, "Go coach the team, I'll handle it from here. You've done what you needed to do." Yes, he could have done more. Absolutely. I'm not dismissing that. But if in his eyes, based on all of the training that he has had up to that point, and having been told, "We've got it from here, your job is to go coach the team, we'll take care of it." If that's the extent, then does he deserve a second chance versus the person who didn't then pursue the further action and flat out lied to him? That's
Um,
where we don't know. And again,
okay,
that's not
so
taking
but
responsibility from Joe
let me
Quenneville.
put the morality clause out there. Let me put the morality clause out there. You go to your employer and say, "This is what happened," and they say, "We're gonna brush it under the rug because you're in the playoffs." How do you live with yourself and not stand up and say, "This is wrong. We need to
And
fix
that's
this now"?
and that's the
So
question of
again,
what did he
that's
know and when?
culpability. But that's culpability. That's him that like the fact that the minute he walked out of that office and he was and what's his name? I can't think of his name. Help.
The
The
general
actual
manager?
coach. No,
Oh,
the actual
Quenneville?
coach. No, not Quinville. The
Yeah. That's the unfortunate part is no one refers to the guy who actually. Um,
but the fact that he wasn't immediately relieved of his duties and an investigation brought upon immediately should have told Quinville where the direction the organization was going in. It took them 3 weeks.
that's the point. Is Quenneville should have
So,
immediately terminated the guy from his staff, and that
right,
falls on
and since
Quenneville.
he didn't do that, he obviously knew that the organization wasn't going to
Aldrich.
do anything. Yes,
It
thank
was
you.
Brad Aldrich.
But so where is the culpability in that? How do you in good faith as a human say, "I'm gonna work for an organization that doesn't care"?
And that's where I, and that's where
That's
Joe
where the
Quenneville had an
winning
opportunity.
above everything comes into play.
Right. And that's where the gray area begins because, like you said, the first and foremost is, was Quenneville the guy who hired him? Just because he's on the staff, you work at Nesson. Do you hire everyone that Nesson hires? No, you don't have a say. And so if he's told, "We're going to investigate this and we'll let you know what we conclude, go do the rest of your job," then that's totally different from, "Okay, we've got it. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of it all." Like, what exactly did he report to them? Did he know what was going on, or was it just, "I've heard some things about this guy. You might want to look into him. Okay, we'll do an investigation." Things that we will not truly know. But to your point, if he did know, how does he live with himself going that way? And quite frankly, if you have that kind of information, why are you letting it still be known that this is what that organization did and
Right.
how they participated in it? And again, if we're looking at it in a box of he gave them limited information, he was told it was going to be all taken care of and that they were going to do an
Sorry, I
investigation,
keep moving.
that's fine. Be comfortable. This is hockey's supposed to be fun. Um, if we're looking at it from that box, and then he truly learned later on the details in a different meeting, whether it was before or after the cup or not, like at a certain point, he had an obligation to say, "This is what I know," or "I'm going to resign because of what I know and what they're not letting me talk about."
Right.
It's
And
that bad.
that's part of it. If it was like if he'd come out and said at the very beginning, I went to this person and told them what was going on, but he deflected. He said nothing.
Exactly.
He said nothing. I would have had more respect for him to say, "Yes, I knew what was going on, but I was told to do this, this, and this," and basically put on a gag order. Would I still want him to be a coach? Absolutely not. But I would have more respect for him as a
And
person
that's
if
and
he
that's the
spoke
problem.
his truth.
And
And
that's the problem that we have with him getting this head coaching job is it's a position where you're supposed to respect him, but no one can respect him.
right,
And that's the problem in hiring him. Now, it's the Ducks. I mean, it if we look at it solely from an on ice perspective, it's an angle they on the ice really kind of needed to take a big swing at. But unfortunately, we're in a world where you can't separate that off ice morality with on ice success, and the NHL is still trying to do that.
right.
That's the crux of the
But
issue.
are
That's what's that?
but are they?
They're trying to say you can have on ice success and you can participate in on ice success, and your problems at home stay at home. Because that's essentially what they're trying to do across the board. They put hockey
But
first, winning above all else. Anything else
right,
isn't our problem.
right.
And that's where it comes down to the morality part. And I forget where I've heard it. I know I've heard Ian say it. I know the short shift guys have said it a bunch. I don't remember who first said it, but best sport, worst league,
Yeah.
100%. And I believe I saw it on your Twitter feed earlier. I know it was about something completely different, but comparing how the NHL has handled um, hits to the head
Oh,
and
yeah.
intentionally inflicting injuries to how the PWHL is handling it.
Yeah.
And obviously, since we last sat down, we've had Sam Bennett hit a few people. We've
Mhm.
had Brandon Hagel hit and get hit. We've had Sam Bennett be Sam Bennett, and the league go, he's Sam Bennett. Who cares? So, like,
Right.
and you have Anthony Stolarz throwing up on the bench and them going, well, maybe he just took a puck to the head because that's what might have caused it. Who
Well, and
cares
it's
if the
hard
puck
too
caused it or not?
because
You still don't want the hit to the head.
you have it's hard because you have some former goalies saying that Bennett never hit him, and I'm like, what do you mean Bennett never hit him? That's like saying Bennett never sucker punched Brad Marchand, you know.
Right. We have
And
video
that's the whole
evidence.
thing. That's the whole thing is until the league actually steps up and disciplines him, it's
Just gonna
never
keep
going to
doing it.
change because he's not a repeat offender. He's a repeat offender that never gets caught, you
Right.
know?
And
And Britta Curl, is the player I was talking about with the PWHL. Um, the initial point of contact was to the head, and then she lifted her elbow for good measure. You know
mhm,
what I mean? So it was a double whammy for her, and this is her third offense. At some point, she's already been suspended twice. This is her third offense. I'm waiting to see what the league says about this last incident because it happened yesterday. But I'm thinking she needs to be suspended for the playoffs. I don't care. that, Minnesota is the Florida Panthers. They
Right.
really are. Like with I mean, yes, the league is supposed to be physical, but they cross the line more often than not than any other team in the league.
Right.
And that's where
And Sam Bennett's a perfect example of,
right,
I don't care whether he intended to hit Stolars in the head or not this time. It's the
right,
fact that he intentionally hit Matthew Nyes. It's the fact that he intentionally hit Brad Marchand. He doesn't earn the benefit of the doubt in this
right.
instance. Now, and then of course, as we're talking about what people say or don't say, they don't make him available the night of for
Right.
comment after the game. And then the next day he comes out with, I didn't even know I hit him. Bullshit.
Or even Paul Maurice, Stoli's our guy. He's a blah blah blah. No, because it doesn't matter.
He's still
Former
wearing the other
teammates,
uniform.
even wearing the other uniform doesn't mean they're not going to be friends off the ice, but he's wearing the other uniform, and that's the way you coach your team. Because Matthew
Right.
Tkachuk took a run at Matthew Marner, and
Right.
Marner,
Exactly. At the same
he's spun,
time.
he's spun out of it. He spun
Right.
out of it. And I know
If he
that a lot of
didn't,
people
Marner
think
could
that
be done
Marner
for the
disappears
series.
and whatnot, but I love Mitch Marner. To me, on the Leafs, besides William Nylander, Mitch Marner is like, for me, he's here, and Austin Matthews is. And I know that Austin Matthews scores a lot of goals or whatever. I just like Mitch Marner's game more.
Oh yeah.
But I put Nylander above both of them.
Yeah,
But
don't get me wrong. I would be okay with having any of them on the team. We
uh,
kind of could use some offense, but
yeah,
again, at
I
what
mean, I would
cost and at
definitely
what
take
price point?
Nylander or Marner over Matthews. There's something about
Sure.
Matthews that I just don't ever want to see him in black and gold. But
No.
for sure would take Marner. Do I think the Bruins will make a run at him? I hope they do, but do I think they'll land him? Probably not. But that's just
Yeah.
my opinion. But anyways,
Which I agree with.
going back to it, it's just the league. You got to go back to the hits on Patrice Bergeron from Randy Jones and from Andrew Alberts, and then the hit on Mark Savard from Matt Cook.
Yep.
You know, that was when the league finally changed the way they looked at hits to the head.
Right.
Now, the fact that Matthew Cook never got supplemental discipline is whatever. I mean, it
I mean,
still
that's
bothers me to
asinine.
this day. Still bothers me to this day that, you know, it's just like how. And now, the league says they're cracking down on hits to the head, but they're not. They're
Right.
being selective. They're being selective, and that's a problem. And that's something the league absolutely 100% needs to address because more and more former players are speaking out on it.
Yeah. And I know a lot of people are trying to laugh at I forget the guy's name. He's the neurologist that does a lot of concussion work, and they're making fun of him because he makes a comment about how Stolar shakes his head, and all goalies do
Yeah,
that. Yes, they do, and that's you're missing the forest by looking through the trees because Anthony Stolars is doing it immediately following getting hit by the puck on an 80 something mile an hour shot to the head. And then he's doing
right.
it again immediately after getting hit with an elbow to the head. Now, again, I would be more willing to believe a lack of intent if he didn't have this history of cheap shots and bullshit. The problem is once you have the history and you don't own that history, by the way, at least with Brad Marchand, part of the reason why players around the league respect Brad Marchand is because even after he got hit, he goes, "Yeah, you try to hurt the other guy. Like
Mhm.
it's what you do. Like obviously you're not trying to end careers, but you're trying to pop the guy.
Right.
Okay, he went and he was honest. And if he were to come out and cheap shot someone and he goes, I shouldn't have done that, you're going to honor his and
It
respect
took
him
him a
for it.
while. It took him a while to get to that point though. And it was
Right,
Bergeron that basically drug him to that point because he was a little shit, when he
right.
first. I mean, and I remember watching one of the unobstructed views, and that was a question. And Bergeron was like, I think I wrote a story about it. Bergeron's like, there are times where you couldn't defend him. And
Yep.
Bruins fans that would just defend him, that put on the black and gold colored glasses, that would just defend Marchand, only care about the Bruins and don't care about the league. And that's fine. You can have that fandom, but you have to, like, there was some slewfoots that I was like, how do you defend him? How do you defend that he did that and he's suspended for it? Like, I remember him being suspended for the Winter Classic at Gillette Stadium because of a slewfoot. Like, come on, dude, knock it off. And then last night, did you see he took a run at Wall behind the net?
Yeah.
I mean, Wall, of course, he didn't fall, gracefully. I'm sure there was a little bit of embellishment, but he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. And just
But
because
was
it's
he
the league,
trying to injure him, or was he trying to make a play physically and be a little excessive about it?
he took a goalie out from behind the net.
And that's where the question is he's out of his own goal. At what point can you hit him like a normal player?
But that's the whole thing. Like, that goes back to Ryan Miller and Milan Lucic. Ryan Miller was so far out of his crease, he was practically at the hash marks when
Yep.
Luch took him out. And they're still arguing about that. You know what I mean? So if it was any other player besides Brad Marchand, people would be like, that's a hockey play. But because it was Brad Marchand, it's
Yep.
you know what I
It's that
mean?
rat.
And
It's that rat.
that's the reputation that Brad Marchand has earned.
And he knows he's earned it. And
Right.
he owns that he's earned it.
Correct.
And like you said, it took him a while to get there, but that's why people respect him, even though he is that way, because he goes, yeah, okay. Sam Bennett just goes, I didn't do nothing wrong. It was
Right.
a play. Now, the argument about protecting goaltenders, that's a whole different story. You are designated this blue paint area where you are safe. That is your safe zone. As soon as you leave your safe zone, you are no longer a goaltender. Period. That is how it should be. Now, that does not mean you
Well,
are
but that's the
susceptible
same.
to illegal checks.
Okay, but that's the same thing, like with a quarterback
Yeah, exactly.
in the
Once you
NFL.
leave,
Once they're out of the pocket, they can be hit like a normal player.
exactly,
But
100%.
what Marchand did last night was not hit him like a regular player.
And that's the problem. That's the
Right.
thing. Now, I will say there is a one exception where I would put in place for goaltenders, and there's really no way to, unless you like paint some yellow strip or something, if they're beelining it for the bench, for the extra skater, then no, I don't think they should be fair game to be hit like any other player. Like, what are you trying to do? You're purposely trying to get in the way of what they're doing, which is a different type of hockey play. So like that, I would say, is interference. But you go to the bench at a 35-degree angle, and Stolars goes to the bench at a 50-degree angle. Like, how are you going to penalize that without, okay, here's a yellow strip that you have to be in if you're the goaltender going to the bench? Like, there's really no way to do that. But I mean, it's that old adage, I know it when I see it. Ryan
Right.
Miller was not going to the bench for an extra skater. He was coming out to play the
No,
puck
he
when
was
Milan
going for
Lucic
the puck. He was
when
going for the
Milan
puck.
Lucic rocked him.
Right.
Anthony Stolarz behind the net, or Wall going behind the net, makes a play on the puck.
Right. Right, but the puck,
Beelining
first
for
of
the
all, the
bench is
puck was
totally
already
different.
gone. The puck was already gone, and Marchand took out his leg. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he tripped him. You know what I mean?
Right. A penalty is a penalty, and it should be called
Right.
regardless. And it
That
comes down to the same debate of, well, if it's a trip in the first 2 minutes, it's a trip in the last 2 minutes. If it's a trip when they're up 5-0, it's a trip when they're down 5-0. And that's how it has to be. You can't pick and choose the rules. And that's one of the other fundamental problems of the NHL, where we go, well, It was an interference, but you really can't call it at this point in the game. Why the
Okay,
hell not?
let's take let's take it a step further back with the embellishment call on Rodriguez. He gets hit from behind, which should have been a penalty. He goes down, goes to the dressing room. It's not like he just went to the bench. He went down to the room, down the tunnel to the room, and they call him for embellishment. What?
Yeah.
Make it make sense.
Listen,
Because
embellishing should be an additional penalty. But if someone has, like, we say this all the time about hockey players. If they can play, they're going to play. No hockey player is willingly going to go, take me off the bench for 5 minutes because I'm quote unquote hurt.
Right.
Like, as much as they want the competitive advantage, faking injury and not coming back for a little while is not
Right.
a hockey player's way of doing things. It's just not. And
It's not basketball.
right. So, like, at a certain point, you have to use common sense and go, he might actually be hurt, not faking.
But even if he wasn't hurt, he got hit from behind, went into the boards, into the glass. How do you call embellishment? It wasn't like he didn't get hit and he went down. He got
Right.
hit. How do you call embellishment? Like, it's not like it was open ice and they barely touched. He got hit into the boards directly on the numbers. How do you get called for embellishment?
And at that point, you have numerous offenses that you can call. You can call a cross check. You can call boarding. You can call interference. You can call roughing. You can call, like,
Right.
and that's when it's just like, and we see that kind of thing all the time where it's like, okay, like, it was the battle in front of the net that Stolarz was part of, where I think it was Ridley Gregg, where he's like cross checking
Yes.
him in the back, and it's like Ridley Gregg gets the penalty, and you're like, that whole thing was started by the goalie.
Right.
Like, if you're gonna send one, at least send them both. At a
Right.
minimum, send them both.
And you know what? If you thought that Rodriguez went down like a ton of bricks and you thought that he embellished that, then at least call the hit from behind and the embellishment. Have it matching. If you think, but that's my whole thing. Like, that's the other argument, because when someone's called for diving, but the other player's called for a trip, like, okay, how do you dive?
Do both?
How do you do both? But this was clearly a hit from behind. There was
Right.
no ghost play on that one. You know what I mean? So it's just like goaltender interference. It's like, let's flip a coin and decide if it's goaltender interference today or if it's goaltender interference in the first period versus the second period. I mean, they have it so backwards that it's just, I don't know if you watch baseball at all.
I'm quite familiar. I don't watch it anymore, but
Okay, so did you hear what happened last night in the Red Sox game?
last night, no.
Okay, so the Rangers player, and I can't remember his name, hits the ball back to the pitcher, and the pitcher threw it to Romy Gonzalez, who's playing first base, right? Gonzalez didn't get the ball. He came off the bag, but the base runner didn't touch the bag at all, like moved out of the base path and like went around. And so when Gonzalez put his foot on, once he collected the ball, he put his foot on the base so that the runner would be out. And it went to review, but they said that the Red Sox didn't appeal it, so therefore the runner was safe. What?
The play
So
never ended until
he didn't touch the bat, because they said that Romy Gonzalez had to tag him out, not touch the base. I'm like, I thought first and third was just touching the base, not, second was the only place you had to tag out him. So,
but that's also only if it's a force too. But the thing is he was never on base to need to be tagged out.
Correct.
That's the problem, where it's like, okay, I understand the rule you're calling, but you're not calling the right one.
And the verbiage in the rule made it even more confusing, that no one understood what the hell was going on.
Yeah, so. But that's one of those ones where it's like, okay, I understand the rule that you're implementing,
yeah,
but you're implementing the wrong rule.
Yeah.
because in order for him to be a taggable base runner, he needs to be on base. And in order to be on base, he has to touch first
Right.
because that completes his movement from batter to base runner.
Correct.
That that's you're arguing a point that's not the one on the debate table. Like, and it comes back to, how do you get tripped, or how do you embellish falling down when you were tripped? Again, to
So,
your point,
but
if you
that
want to
one,
call the embellishment, at least call the trip.
right. So, but like, if you're gonna call, if this is, I know a lot of people don't like video review, which I hate video review for offsides. When it's a goal, because if the puck has been, especially like if it's a bang bang play, then maybe I'm okay with offsides. But if the puck is in the zone for a good amount of time,
There should be,
going
in
back,
my opinion, a 30-second clock. You
right?
can't challenge
So,
anything from 30 seconds prior to the goal as far as entering the zone.
but if there's a referee that has their arm up to call a trip, and then the other ref says, "Well, I'm calling embellishment," that should be looked at. Did the trip actually happen? That will take 2 seconds to see if the trip actually happened, because they can review whether or not a high stick was friendly fire,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Or if it was the opposing player. So, but like, and I know everyone wants to speed up the game, but that'll help get rid of embellishment calls. That'll help get rid of, you know what I mean?
Well,
Because
here's the other thing.
maybe players will stop diving to get the benefit of the doubt if they weren't tripped.
Well, here's the other thing too. I know Elliot Friedman has talked about it beforehand when it comes to those offside reviews and what it looks like in the truck and what it looks like in the office back in Toronto. I think it was Elliot Friedman. It might have been Chris Johnson, one of those guys. Where when it comes to those offside reviews, there is someone in the officials who's looking at every single zone entry all the time. Every zone entry, that person is in the truck or wherever, sitting there going, that was onside. That one's onside. That one was onside. So every time there's a challenge, they know, the officials already know what way it's going to go and whatnot. We already have that implemented for offside review. I'm not saying change that. First and foremost, you want to complain about the time that which it takes to review stuff. Well, that's on the league because they make the on ice officials skate over, put the big ass fucking headphones on, look at the itty bitty iPad like they're a brain surgeon. They have to zoom in, zoom out. Why can't they just go over, same way they call to a bullpen in baseball? Pick up a phone. Was it offsides or not? Yes.
Right.
Okay. Click. Play was offside. Done. Guess what? You just added 5 minutes back to your play.
Right.
It's not as complicated. Like, put it on for this big show, this, and they got to do all these replays on TV. Guess what? They have plenty of time on TV to do those replays. Every time there's a freaking whistle, they can do a split screen and show the replay. This is what the officials saw. This is why they called it offside, and move on.
But the trucks for the broadcast don't have the same
That's
views that the league has, which is fine, because so that's just like the goal that they called a non-goal. I forget what series it was, might have been Winnipeg, where the puck was clearly over the red line.
Oh, in the
And
glove.
yeah, it was in the glove,
Pennington's
but
glove save.
it was over the red line in the goal, which was a goal.
And technically, because the glove was there, you couldn't see the puck. So you couldn't confirm that it was in the net or not, because you couldn't find the edge of the puck. Like, you could draw one with, imaging and draw the line. Like, you can do all that and you can reasonably infer the puck is in the goal. That's a goal. However, by the definition of the rule in the book, you can't call it a goal, which that's a whole different argument. But based on that play,
But the
it is what it
NFL,
is.
the tip of the tip of the ball just has to cross the plane
Right.
for it to be a touchdown. Like, it's just stupid.
Right. And
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. Thanks for letting me know. I thought I went in and fixed it, but I think I might have done it too soon to have everything register for this episode. But thank you for letting me know. I think I found where the problem is. So much appreciated. And oh, hi to you too. um, and here's, I guess, where the issue comes to play. Like, let me ask you this: the defensive line, right? Is that part of the O zone or part of the D zone?
Are you talking about the blue line?
The blue line. Red, neutral zone or D zone?
Well, it depends on
Exactly.
what.
Hold on. That's the point. You cannot, there is no answer. Because if you're going into the offensive zone, then once the puck hits the paint of the line, it should be considered in the zone. Right?
Okay. Right.
And that will alleviate, just like you talked about with the tip of the football, right? As soon as it crosses the plane, they've designated in football, it has to cross the plane of the white. If you can see this, it's a touchdown.
Right.
If the puck is covering any bit of the paint of the line, it's in the O zone. Period.
Well, they
And
don't.
that will eliminate
that
a
should
lot of,
that should be the way it is.
and that will eliminate a lot of the, well, where's his skate blade in relation to the paint? Where's the puck in relation
Does he
to
have
the paint?
Possession?
All that stuff. No, Kevin, we
Or
haven't missed talking about the 7th overall pick.
We haven't even gotten there yet. Or or did the other offensive player lift his skate so it wasn't on the ice, like crossing? Like, just I agree. Like, just.
I'm glad
But
they got rid of
but
the
I get in the
rule
same
about it
sense
having to be
because.
on the ice.
But the other thing is though is that with hockey, a goal is not a goal unless the entire puck crosses the red line, where in football it's literally just has to break the plane. So I think that they're keeping that same rule for offsides than they are for the goal. You know what I mean?
If that's the case, then when the puck is on the line, it's not over the line, and therefore it has to be offsides every single time. Period. End of story. Now, one thing that I will say, because we run into all this because the league doesn't provide answers, because there is so much debate, because people, like you said,
they provide answers. They're just not accurate.
Well, right. They're not accurate because they want to leave the inconsistency, because that pits fan base against this, against that, and fine. The NBA, where they come out with that last minute or two or whatever, where they go, this is where the officials were right, this is where they were wrong, and they review that. It's quite simple. Do you remember when Brendan Shanahan took over as Department of Player Safety and they were doing those suspension videos, and they were actually somewhat consistent?
Yes.
If the league could come out and go, this is what we saw with the offside review. They can present the tape that the officials saw even after the broadcast. And then we have a better insight into what the officials saw. And the problem is the NHL has that video and they hoard it. And instead of being able to go, oh, they had this angle of it that we did not see. That's why when the footage of Brad Marchand getting that punch from Sam Bennett came out from the other angle, everyone's like, where the fuck was this footage?
Right.
Because it was not from the broadcast. The league was trying to hold on to that as a way to be like, we don't have to issue supplemental discipline here. They got past the supplemental discipline point, and then the video came out, and everyone's like, how did you not discipline him with this angle? Like, that's the problem, is the league itself has no transparency to what goes on. And that means, again, am I trying to defend the NBA or defend the NFL that every time something nefarious happens on or off the ice or off the field or whatever, that they handle it perfect every time? Absolutely not. But let me ask you this.
Right.
In a world of scandalous behavior, which league do you trust even a little bit more? The NFL or the NHL?
Mhm.
And that speaks massive volumes.
Right.
So,
Yes.
yes, the YouTube comments.
We went off on a big tangent of non-Bruin stuff to start, Kevin. I apologize. I started because I've been infuriated with the fact that the Ducks hired Joel Quenneville, so we started off with that. Then we
The
went to,
playoffs. We had to talk a little bit about
um,
the playoffs.
the playoffs, kind of. We were talking about the hits that weren't called, the embellishments, and
And now
different
we're just
stuff like
changing
that.
league
So we
rules and
kinda
how
went
they
off
run
on a
things.
tangent. Yeah. We're just having some fun.
But
So,
and real
yeah.
quick to, is that you're supposed to be Gucci? I don't know. YouTube comments. My understanding with that is through the program that we use to stream. There is a bot that monitors chats, and that monitors threshold is significantly lower, and so therefore YouTube defaults to having those comments shut off. Um, I went in to try to fix that prior to the show itself starting. I just don't think there was enough time for cross-platform communication. So hopefully on our next show, I think there's a change in like user agreements and stuff like that. So still looking into find the actual solution, but I think I found it. But to Kevin's point, the 7th overall pick, the Bruins now
Yeah.
have a draft pick, and we know where it is.
Mhm.
Immediately after the draft results came out, I was laughing my head off because so many people were reacting. I can't believe they got screwed. They're in the 7th pick and blah blah blah. This was always an option. Like
Right.
we always knew they could be picking as low as 7. So I don't know
I just
why
think
people are outroared over it.
I think it's because the Islanders got the top pick. I think that's why more people were like, "What the hell?" Because I think everyone was expecting either San Jose or Chicago to get the number 1 pick again. You know what I
And that's
mean?
the whole
Like,
point of the lottery.
right. I
Because
I
all of those
100%
fans
agree.
would not be
And
giving
then
a
people,
flying iota if Boston got it.
right, right. So,
That's what I
yeah,
love
I
about it.
mean, yeah. So,
That's the part that I find hilarious about it, because no one would care if it was Boston who got the draw to go to 1 or even 2. That would have been okay. But because it was the Islanders who had a lower chance, like that's the reason why they do it the way they do it. But 7th was always a possibility, and that's why. And we talked about it the last time. Was we weren't going to dive too much into it because having the Islanders pick above you changes the draft table compared to having San Jose with the first overall pick, compared to having, because if it was Sharks, Blackhawks, Predators, Flyers, and then it was Sabres, that's a very different draft board than one that we actually have.
right.
So I still
Especially because
think they're
Utah's
looking.
picking 4th.
Exactly. I still think they're looking at Caleb Denoyer. I still think he's their number 1 target for being this low in the draft. My question
I
to you
Him or
is,
Victor Eklund is my other one.
Victor Eklund is another one I was looking at as well. My question to you, though, is given the layout of the board in front of you, you have a legitimate opportunity to trade up. Do you consider doing that?
It depends on what you have to give up for it. That's the whole thing. Like, so how much further up can you get?
And that's the ratio there, right? Because the teams that are ahead of you, my question to you is, which one's the closest to competing now?
The teams ahead of you,
Yeah,
the Islanders or Utah.
I would say the Islanders, Utah, and Philly. But Philly's one spot ahead of you. There's no point to move up one.
Yeah, like, but Philly, I think that they're more pieces away
Yeah, I
than
would agree.
than than um than New York or
And let's
Utah.
be honest, Torch squeezed a lot of blood out of that rock.
He did. Yeah,
So
and having them have the 6th pick, it doesn't really, that does nothing unless there's a player that you absolutely want, that you think that the Flyers are going to take. You know what I mean? That's the only way I see them moving from 7th to 6th.
Now, and I would also say some of this depends on how the draft itself falls, because even Kevin's saying Denoyer won't be there at 7th unless Brady Martin and Jake O'Brien continue to climb the draft boards, which is fair. He also said Jake O'Brien, Brady Martin, or Victor Eklund, if one of the top 4 centers or Martone doesn't drop. You don't know who's going to drop. That's the thing. I
Right.
mean, so my question is if you're that high on Denoyer, as an example, right? And you've got Schaefer off the board, you've got Misa off the board, and you've got Hagens off the board, and Utah's on the clock, right? Let's say they take Martone, right?
Right.
Would you approach Nashville and say, we'll give you 7th and Matthew Poitras for the opportunity for us to take Denoyer? Right now, you've got a little bit of a logjam at center. I love Matthew Poitras. That's why I'm asking, because it's going to have to be the 7th pick plus something else, and whatever that something else is, you're not going to want to part with it. I promise you
Right.
that you're not going to want to part with it. But right now, where does Matthew Poitras fit?
Which one of them is more ready or closer to being ready to contributing to the NHL club?
Right now, it's Matthew Poitras. But what?
Right.
My question to you is what are your other moves? You mentioned Mitch Marner. If you plan on going out and signing Mitch Marner, then you want to keep your Matthew Poitras because you're competing now. But if you're designating this year as a retool season, not just an off season, but an entire season to retool and compete more so, not in the 2025-26 season, but the 26-27 season.
But that's not Sweeney. That is not Sweeney. That is not Sweeney. Sweeney will never take a year off. He is going to put they are already saying that they expect to be in the playoffs next season.
Right. So that rules out that kind of move. In general, it rules that out. So that means you're not going to jump to 6, 5, or 4, really, unless you look at Michael Misa as someone who can play right now, which I think the general consensus is the only player who would be able to be NHL ready for the 2025-26 season is Matthew Schaefer.
Right.
I don't see them moving the pick. I don't, or at least I don't see them moving it to move up. They are going to stay at 7.
But I don't see them. But I don't see unless they trade the pick to bring in, like we were talking about the last time. I think we were talking about like trading away the pick with a prospect for someone that's in the NHL right now. Who are we talking about? Robertson?
The name I was going to say Robertson would have been the name I would have thrown out there.
I believe that's who we were talking about. Unless they're going to make a move like that, I don't see them moving down. Moving up could be, you know what I mean? But I don't see them moving down. And unless they can, I mean, it depends on what they have to give up, because Kevin's right. Misa's ready. So Misa's ready and Schaefer's ready. So do they go to the Islanders? Do they go to the Predators? I mean, or, not the
the Islanders, there's a lot, and I don't disagree with it. Noah Dobson, Matthew Schaefer. That's a pretty damn good pairing going forward for them.
Right.
And they don't need forward talent. Like, they have a lot of forwards. So my question to you is, what are you offering them so you can get that first overall pick? Now, so here's my question. Would you offer the 7th and Mason Lohrei?
For the chance to get Misa?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would.
There you go. That's the kind of move that we're looking at making.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
But now
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
The only problem I would have with that is, and that is the health of Hampus Lindholm. If you have any questions about his health, you cannot deal Mason Lohrei.
Right.
because you
Well,
don't have enough on the left side if you don't have Hampus Lindholm.
but it also depends on what other moves that they make. Because who's to
Yeah,
say that they don't trade another draft pick for another, you know what I mean? And another
right.
prospect for a player that's in the NHL.
Yeah, Kevin, they said that Hampus is fine, and I'm not saying he's not, but have you seen the medicals? Because I know I haven't. And for someone the size of Hampus Lindholm, who relies on his knees the way he does, until I see him fine, I'm going to
Yeah,
have the
but
worry.
listening to him in the locker room on breakup day, I'm gonna say that he's probably will be ready to go.
Didn't we think the same thing about Kevin Miller, though?
Um,
I'm
I
just
think it's,
saying,
but I
until
think,
I see it.
but but he came back
I
earlier
know.
than he should
I know.
have,
I
and
have a much more positive outlook.
shutting Lindholm down for the entire season and allowing him the opportunity to do what he needs to do. I think that's the difference.
And I have a much more positive outlook on what we could see from Hampus Lindholm than what we saw from Kevin Miller. All I'm
Right.
saying is you have to be absolutely certain in order to move off of Mason Lohrei. Now,
See,
if
I
they
just
move,
I
you disagree. Okay, that's fine. We
mm,
don't always agree. That's what makes us so good at
right,
this. So,
right,
what part don't
so,
you
I
agree
mean,
with?
I because the thing is that they still have to find a way to find that right player to replace Brandon Carlo anyways.
So, right now, your left side, Hampus, Zadorov, and Lohrei. Those are your starting three, right? We agree on that.
Mhm. Yep.
Who's behind them?
On the
What's
left?
your what's your depth chart look like on the left side going into next year? We know, and it doesn't matter who they're paired with or anything like that. For the sake of the left side of your defense, you are going to go in some order: Hampus, Nikita, and Mason. Right now, Parker Wotherspoon is a UFA, so I guess you could look to bring him back. Would you be okay with Parker Wotherspoon, Nikita Zadorov, and Hampus Lindholm as your starting three if you deal away Mason Lohrei?
Well, but hold on, who's in Providence?
Right now, your Providence left side has Monsieur, who has not looked great in the playoffs, by the way. He's struggling to adjust, it seems. You got Freddie Brunet. Loke Johansson is under contract, but he's still in juniors. Um, let's see, Jackson Edward and Michael Callahan. So in that group, you're really looking at Freddie Brunet and Michael Callahan for your left side.
Right.
So now if you're telling me that you move Seven and Lohrei to draft Michael Misa, and that you're going to re-sign Wotherspoon and re-sign Callahan because he's a Group 6 free agent, and your left side is going to be Hampus and Zadorov with Callahan
But
and
you're
Wotherspoon.
assuming that they're not making any other moves.
Have you seen the left side defensive crop out there for free agents? Whoop, did we lose you?
Oh.
Oh, I got you back.
But you're assuming that they're not going to make any other moves either. You know what I mean? Like
So when it comes to
we've already established that Sweeney is not the type of GM that just stands pat. He's always looking for
so
those rough-edged, under the radar players that believes just needs a change of scenery, Morgan Geeky, to excel in their position. So if my problem is that, yeah, maybe we don't give up on Mason Lohrei after the horrendous season he had. But I mean, if you know Hampus Lindholm is going to be ready, if you know Hampus Lindholm, or you're banking on Hampus Lindholm being ready, you know you have Zadorov. You know what I mean? Like, I'm willing
Right.
to gamble that to get a top 6 forward that's going to have to help the team now.
And I fully admit, there are other options out there. For instance, you could, and I'm not saying this is what they'll do, but like, you're familiar with Matt Grzelcyk. He's an unrestricted free agent. Maybe you can bring him back on the cheap. Or Bowen Byram, he's a restricted free agent, but maybe he's an option. Maybe you look at Ivan Provorov, or like, I get it. There
Right.
are other options.
Right.
My question to you is, are you confident enough in that secondary move, whatever it is, that obviously right now you don't have it in your pocket? You have to
Okay.
have that secondary move known.
But you don't, because who do you put more who do you put more stock in? Who do you think is going to help the team more? Misa or Lohrei?
Going into
Be
next
honest.
season,
Go into next season.
next season would probably be Mason Lohrei.
You think Mason Lohrei would help the team more?
In the 25-26 season, which is the one we're talking about, yes.
And he's ready. Misa's ready.
So whose spot are you putting Michael Misa in? What's your lineup with Misa in the lineup? Is he ready for NHL top 6?
I think you start him on the third line and then work him up.
So you start him in, basically you start Fraser Minton down in Providence. Because Misa's not someone you're throwing on the wing.
Right.
Or would you
And
move Minton to wing?
right. So I mean, but if he's going, so he can either, if
See,
he's
Kevin says
ready,
Misa's ready for NHL top 6.
and if he's ready for NHL top 6, then he can have the second line. I don't see
I
them.
agree.
I see them coming into training camp with them expecting Pasternak, as long as they sign Geeky, Pasternak, Geeky, and Lindholm running that top line.
That's fully what
And
I
on the
expect as
second line,
well.
and then if you get that second line, you can put Misa with Zaka, and who's the other wing that
Would it be Fabian Lysell?
I'm like drawing a complete blank. Why not? You know what I mean? And then you have Fraser Minton for the third line, and you have Kostelic for the fourth line.
He's already a major upgrade for this team for your second line. Maybe he is. I'm not arguing that
So
he isn't or that he won't be. My question is or my point is you have to be sure. Like, Don Sweeney has to be sure. And
but you can't, but that's the whole thing. With sports, anything can happen. No one expected, we'll talk about this again. Patrice Bergeron, no one expected him when he was drafted to turn into Patrice Bergeron.
oh, I know.
Brad Marchand was nothing compared to what he is now when he first, you know what I mean?
100%.
So absolutely, the biggest downfall of the Bruins this past season, outside of injuries and the goalie controversy to start the season, was they did not have secondary scoring or playmakers, correct?
I mean, they didn't really have that all season.
Right. But that was their biggest downfall of the season, outside of the injuries and outside of the goalie controversy, was that they never looked at replacing Jake DeBrusk. They were banking on certain players down the middle, Charlie Coyle, to play, you know what I mean? So if you have the opportunity to get that offense that you've been lacking at the expense of Mason Lohrei, I'm making that deal.
So here's the other issue that I look at too. We're talking about the lack of offense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a lack of offense, or is it a lack of the behaviors that create the offense? Because I want to know from you, who had the who were the top 5 players in shot attempts, shots on goal this season? I know you're going to look it up, but
I have to because I don't know off
I
the
already
top of my
have it
head.
pulled up. That's why I want to know if you can guess them. I'll give you a
Oh, if I
hint.
can.
David Pastrnak was first
Oh yeah, I mean David Pasternak's going to be first.
by a lot. Brad Marchand was second, and you want to know what the difference was? Pastrnak had
Probably
319 shots
like
on goal to Brad Marchand's 175.
right,
Over a 100 shot difference. No one is
right. And
shooting the puck.
Elias Lindholm had 151, and Morgan Geekie had 150. I mean Nikita Zadorov had more shots on goal than Charlie Coyle.
So my question is who on this team is shooting the damn puck? No one. They need
Right.
people who will shoot. And that's why I think they're going to be okay with staying at 7, because they can get a guy like Eklund at 7 who still shoots. Now, I know everybody's worried about Misa and getting the center and stuff, but my question to you is how helpful is that really if you don't have guys who shoot the puck?
Who's giving him the puck?
I mean, right now it would be Middlestad and Lindholm and Minton or Patra.
No. Lindholm's off the table because he's with Pastor and Geeky. So Lindholm's off the table. Who's giving Eklund the puck?
Right now it would be Middlestad.
Okay.
Now, I think you can upgrade there. I don't disagree with that.
That's the whole thing. If you have a better center, then maybe Pavel Zacha has a better season.
So do you think Matthew Poitras is a better center than Casey Middlestad?
Yes.
Okay. So right now we're sitting.
The problem that I have with Matthew Poitras is he still doesn't know how to protect himself or the puck. And I think he's learning that. And I believe he's learning that down in Providence. I believe him spending this time in Providence is doing wonders for his development. Okay.
I agree with that. I wholeheartedly agree with that.
100% a better playmaker than Casey Middlestad. 100% better at playmaking.
Right. So do you weaken your blue line to go and get Michael Misa, or are you able to sufficiently distribute the puck until Poitras ready to take those hits at the NHL
But I'm
level?
not sure Mason Lohrei really weakens your blue line.
He might not. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm okay. I would be okay with that deal. What I'm trying to do is say, like, we know what they're not going to do, right? We know they're not going to take the 7th overall pick and move up 2 spots. We've ruled that kind of move out.
Right.
So I also look at Sweeney's history and kind of who he is. He's not that home run kind of guy where he's going to go from 7 with Lohrei to 1st overall. Do you really see that in Don Sweeney's behavior?
So, well, he does it every other place except for the draft. He hits the home runs with the trades all the time, right?
I
And
would
it
say
depends
so.
it depends on what Sweeney believes is the bigger need and how he feels about free agency. Okay. So I think if he thinks that he can land a certain amount of players in free agency that will help the offense, then he stands put and goes after Eklund. I don't see him drafting a defenseman in the 1st round because they're deep in prospects. You know what I mean?
I never thought that even if they landed with the 1st overall pick, I never thought Schaefer would be their guy. Now, if they landed the 1st overall pick, I would have been in favor of trading down to 2nd or 3rd, depending on who was there, simply because you did not need Schaefer.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with that, and I would have no problems with them trading away the top overall pick, which Bruins fans would absolutely have a nutty about, but
they just freaked out because they signed Patrick Brown to an extension, which I thought was hilarious. Because we said that last time. When they re-signed Patrick Brown, they were going to freak out, and they did. Bruins fans did not fail in that one. So, but we both agreed that they should have signed Patrick Brown and that they would sign him, and they did. So I'd like to give ourselves a little pat on that back for that.
My thing is with this first round pick, a top 10 pick, they need to do one of two things. They need to draft someone that's NHL ready to shut up the masses, or they need to figure out a way to package the pick and a player to get someone who is a bona fide goal scorer that's at the NHL level now.
So you're saying that this person needs to be NHL ready right now. I think, haven't we already established, though, that very few in this draft are NHL ready right now?
Yes, but what I mean is, though, if you're going to...
Oh, yes. Okay, I see what you're saying. I gotcha.
If not,
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Then they need to, like, if they draft Eklund at 7 and he starts the season in Providence, I'm okay with that.
100%. Same. Absolutely.
Right.
And I know Kevin's talking about Jake O'Brien and some of the other guys as well. I'd have to look and see which ones are eligible to play in Providence as well, simply because not all of them are going to be eligible for Providence. I think you need to pick someone who you can put in Providence. I think that's the bigger problem.
Yes,
because
they can't another Patra where they only have 9 games to decide what to do with his future.
Right, because what'll happen, and you mentioned picking an NHL player who's ready to shut up the masses, but when has Don Sweeney or Cam Neely ever done something to shut up the fan base? If anything, they stoke the fire more. they poke and prod at the fan base more than anything. So
I think if they can get the deal done with Geeky sooner than later, that'll shut up the fan base.
I think so. I think that'll ease a lot of people's concern. Absolutely.
Bringing back Bergeron for that 1 year, bringing back Krejci basically out of retirement for that 1 year, that shut up the fan base. Making all the moves that they did at the trade deadline in that season shut up the fan base. You know what I mean? So yes, they have done it, but as good as they do things, it's always, and it's like that in anything that you do, whether it's customer service, writing, podcasts, you're an athlete, it doesn't matter. Your errors are always what the masses will glorify versus the accomplishments.
That's why we're just mistake free. That's why I brought you on, so that there are no mistakes.
Yeah.
So I think they stay pat. I really think that they are comfortable in the 7 spot because, as I mentioned when we first started talking about it, they always knew the 7th pick was possible.
Right.
They always knew that. And so they're not going to panic if Misa's off the board or Martone is off the board. They're going to go, this is our list of guys.
Right.
Our number 1 guy is still there.
So let me ask you this. What's more important for the Bruins in this offseason? Finding scoring or finding a center?
Finding scoring.
I agree with you. So that's why, like, I know everyone's like, we don't have a true 1C. Well, you do. You have it in Elias Lindholm. He's a true 1C. He's going to...
Well, let me repose this question, right? What's the purpose of having the 1C? To generate offense.
Right.
So if you have David Pastrnak shooting the puck 300 plus times a season and scoring over 100 points, you have a guy. If we look at every single team, even right now in the NHL playoffs, there is one player that you look at and go, he can put the team on their back single-handedly. Mikko Rantanen in Dallas. Connor McDavid in Edmonton, Jack Eichel or Mark. There's a couple guys in Vegas that you would point to. I think most people right now would point to Jack Eichel though.
Right.
Now you look at Boston and you go
Matthews and
David
Nylander.
Pastrnak.
Right.
Right. The problem that we make fun of Toronto for is having 4 guys who do that, and then every single one of them collapses in the playoffs. And so then they go from having 4 guys to having 4 quarter guys.
Right.
They literally trade 4 horses in for 4 ponies and get 1 horse in the playoffs, and that's why we make fun of them.
Right.
You have your horse already. You need the complementary pieces around him. Does that person have to play center? No.
I would argue that they need more scoring than they do centers, because they still have a lot of depth down the middle. They really still have a lot of depth down the middle, but they don't have.
You still have guys who can move into the center role too. Donzlach Mellis, I think he'll make a better winger. Doesn't mean you can't move him into the center.
Right.
Like, that's why they draft a lot of the guys they have. Morgan Geekie can kick into the middle if you need him to.
Right.
What you need him to do is put the puck in the net, whether he's at center or on the wing. He needs to score. If Morgan Geekie is your team's number 2 goal scorer, there's your problem. That's your problem. He should be 3rd, maybe even 4th when it comes to your team scoring. Not because he sucks, but because if he's your second scorer on your team, you're not good enough.
Well, but I would argue that who is Boston's second scorer then? Without Morgan Geekie, it was Brad Marchand before he left.
But that's my point, is there should be someone between Pastrnak and Geekie. The issue is not Geekie having 57 points. It's the fact that no one had more than 57 and under 106.
Right, and that's why I'm saying that they never replaced Jake DeBrusk.
Exactly.
They never replaced their secondary scoring. And Morgan Geekie, they expected Geekie, Coyle, Frederick. They expected all these players to elevate their game and continue to grow as they had over the past season and the season before that. And Geekie was the only one that did.
Exactly. And so that's why what I'm looking for when I'm looking at the free agent market, I'm looking at who can score. Mitch Marner can score.
Mm-hmm. He can also distribute the puck.
Exactly.
He's also a great playmaker.
So my concerns about who's already on the roster, right? This is where you kind of have to look at what you have versus what you need and kind of play that game, because you have David Pastrnak. I have no issues, qualms, or anything like that. I just noticed that Puckpedia lists him as a right wing and a left wing, and I find that absolutely hilarious. Pastrnak does not play the left side. I don't want him to play the left side. I hope they remove that ASAP. That bothers me. And if you look at the Geekie, Lindholm, Pastrnak line, no issues with it whatsoever. Because even though Geekie should be your 3rd leading scorer, and at that point, Lindholm would probably be your 2nd leading goal scorer or point getter, that's not the line that you mess with. You need to look at your 2nd and 3rd line from there. Middlestead is a puck distributor. He does not have an overly active shot. Mm-hmm. Pavel Zacha, for whatever reason, does not shoot the puck enough. He has a great shot. He does not use it enough. And that's the issue that I have with Zacha. If you put Middlestead and Zacha on the same line, are we going to run into perfect shot mentality? We're looking for the perfect shot. I don't want to take the shot. I want to set you up for it. And we end up with more passes back and forth than we can possibly fathom. And we can't stop hearing shoot the puck from the rafters.
I think that Zacha defaulted to trying to be the playmaker for most of the season because he was on the same line as Pastrnak. Whenever he's not on the line with Pastrnak, he does shoot more. Because let's be realistic. If you're on a line with Pastrnak, who's shooting the puck?
Oh, you want him to shoot it. Absolutely.
Right.
But that's my
So,
question
but
is
the minute they took him off the line, you saw his offense get a little bit better as well, because
so
he
my question
wasn't
is, do you
just
want him in the
trying
wing or do you
to.
want him down the middle?
I would have no problems with Zaka being on the wing as long as he has someone that can give him the puck.
So
I think
and
Pavel Zacha is one of those players that he can play the wing, and he's more free when he plays the wing than when he's playing in the middle.
do you think, and this is a little off topic, but do you think Pavel Zacha plays better when he's, I don't want to say the guy on the line, but when he is more of the line leader when it comes to mentality? For instance, would you rather see him on the wing of Casey Middlestead or on the wing of Fraser Minton?
Wait, say that again?
So would you rather see Pavel, like the combination A, where you go Zaka, Middlestead, Liesel, or if your third line was Zaka, Minton, and someone else like Lauko, for instance?
Okay, but who plays on the second line if you take Zaka off the
We'll
second
come
line?
back to that. We'll come back
Well,
to that.
no, you can't. No. You have to give me the full scenario. Because
Well,
if I'm gonna, because like if you have Zaka with Middlestat, who's on the other side?
if you go Zaka, Middlestead, Liesel,
Oh,
that would be your
Lysell. You
second.
said Lysell. I like that
Right.
line. I like that line. Or and that's only if Patra is not ready. If Patra is ready, I would love to see Patra centering Lysell and Zaka.
If Zaka will shoot the puck, I wholeheartedly agree with you on that.
I
And
think
I
that Zaka
agree.
would I think Zaka would shoot the puck because Patra is a better playmaker than Zaka. So putting Patra between Lysell and Zaka could give you a better scoring second line than they had all season.
How do you rely on them defensively? How confident are you in? So here's my question: Would you enroll that more as a third line of Zaka, Patra, Liesel? That way, there your second line is more of, because you got to remember them. We talk first, second, third line like it's old school. Boston doesn't think that way. They're going to play
Right.
the matchups. So
Right.
you're putting Lindholm, Pastrnak, and Geeky out against an Austin Matthews line. You're going to put them against the Jake Gensel line in Tampa Bay. Like that's just how your matchup is going to be. But defensively, if you have Zaka, Patra, and Liesel, how confident are you in them against a Mitch Marner line?
About
Assuming
as
you don't have
confident as
Marner.
I am with Pasternak playing defense. I mean,
Okay.
let's be realistic. Pasternak is not the great defender. He's
No,
not, you know what I mean? He's not a great defender at all.
but he outscores his mistakes, right?
Oh.
You had to know I was going to throw that out there.
Touche. But I mean, if we're being realistic about it, Pasternak is not a great defender. Just like Connor McDavid's not a great defender.
No, but he sure as hell outscored his mistakes.
Right, and then I'm okay with that. But that's why a lot of the times in the Bruins world, you see your third and fourth line out against your against the opposing top line because those are your best defending forwards.
I
You used to see Charlie Coyle. Well, I mean, when you had Bergeron and Marchand, that was different, right?
That was
That
different.
was
They would go out and defend
100%
against
different.
anybody.
They would go out there against anyone. And when you had Krejci as your second center, he would go out there against anyone. That's not what Boston has anymore. It's
Right.
not what Boston has. So, but yes, Lindholm is gonna take your defensive zone faceoffs.
I think it'll be Lindholm or your fourth line.
Right.
I think the fourth line is going to be more of that defensive, but I do
Right.
think they're going to go with a speed and forecheck fourth line. So I genuinely believe that they will give Beecher his qualifying offer because of his injury.
Right.
Once I heard about the injury,
Well,
I
yeah,
went,
I mean, if
"Oh,
we had
he'll
known about the
qualify."
injury, we probably wouldn't have been down on him all season.
Exactly. As soon as I heard the injury and possible surgery, I went, "He's going to get his QO."
Yeah.
If anything, it just puts that decision off for another year, but fine. He
Right.
didn't do anything egregious. He just can't score.
Right. Well,
But
he definitely didn't have the year that he had his first year. You know what I
right.
mean? But now that we know that it was partly injury related, then that changes a lot. Kevin, so who do you guys want them to pick with the seventh pick realistically, based off of who should be there based on thing?
So I still think Denoye is their top choice, as he would be mine. Kevin said earlier he doesn't think he'll be available at that point, and I genuinely don't know if he will or not, given the layout of the board. As long as he's on the board, he would be my number one pick for the Bruins at 7. That is, if they have an opportunity to get Misa or Denoye by moving up a little bit, at what cost? Again, I'm okay with what we talked about. Lori in the 7th to move up. I would do that as high as 3, to be honest with you. If you're going to get into the top 3 where you can get your top pick, because their top pick is going to be Misa or Denoye, in my opinion. I just think Denoye, the more I've read on him, he just seems like a Bruins pick, that the guy they would want. But regardless of whether it's Denoye or, if it's someone who you don't think is going to get out of the top 5, let me put it that way, right?
Right.
Because really it's the top 4 centers on the board at that point.
Right.
Because it's Schaefer and then the top 4 centers, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you believe in one of those guys so hard fast, right, that you're willing to jump from 7 to 3 to get him, I don't care which one it is, because it's either going to be Misa or the guy that you're that passionate about. For me, I think that guy for Boston would be Denoye, and that's why I don't see them jumping up that hard to get him, because unless they're making a move for Misa, I don't think there's anyone that they look at and go, we have to give up so much capital to get him. I think they look at all of them and go, we'll be happy with any of them. So at 7, if they stay pat, I think they end up maybe going Jack O'Brien or O'Brien if he's available, and Denoye is.
If Misa, if they can't move up to get Misa, or if Denoye is not available, I think they go with Eklund.
I'm okay with Eklund. I'm okay with O'Brien. I think they lean more towards the center because, as you said, they like to shut up the fan base a little bit. And if they take the center,
but I think that they have so much depth at center. That's the whole thing. They have a lot of depth at center. They really do.
I would be rooting for Eklund based off of what I've read and seen on both of them. I would be rooting for Eklund, but I think they would go O'Brien.
Yeah, I would rather them go Eklund than O'Brien, because I think Eklund is what they need more, unless they can get Denoye or Misa. You know what I mean? In my honest opinion, unless they can get one of those 2 players, then you move away from the center and you go for the left wing.
I think they go best player available. Honestly, I don't think they care about position at 7.
But if they don't.
But Kevin, you're so focused on getting a top 6 center and making them a center. You just need a top 6 player who can produce points and produce offense. Do you need a top 2 center if you sign Mitch Marner as a free agent? I don't think you do.
I'm not giving up on the fact that Matthew Poitras isn't going to be a top 6 center.
I think the reason why he's staying down in Providence is so he can become that top 6 center.
Correct.
And maybe he's your 2C, but if he's your 2C and he's developed what I already said that I don't know which thing we're talking about there, Kevin. Um, I think Poitras is able to take over as your 2C mid next season.
Right, and you
That's
have Lindholm blocked up.
Yep.
So you have Lindholm, who's a top 6C. You have Poitras, who's gonna be ready to be a top 6C. You have
Now,
Zacha. You have Zacha, who can move to the wing, or if need be, he can start, on the second line as a C if he needs to. But and he can also play with Pastrnak. He's already proved he can play with Pastrnak. But I think that you have a better opportunity with Lindholm playing with the way he played down the stretch with with Pastrnak and Geeky. You've got it. And if he's healthy, because I think that was what they were going for last year. He just wasn't healthy coming into and out of training camp. So I
right.
think that you're in, and I think that um you know, it's more important. They do have the depth at sea. It's just, yeah, when you talk about who's ready to be a top 6C, I don't think that Poitras is that far off. And I think him spending majority of this season in Providence is doing wonders for his development.
Oh yeah, I mean I've seen it this year in
100%.
Providence alone.
And I know a lot of people are like, well, he should have been playing up at the whole time. No, he needed to play down. He needed to get those reps. He needed to get hit and not worry about getting hit. You know what I mean? He needed to develop his game a little bit more. And I think
Mhm.
that he's going to be ready a lot sooner than people think.
Oh, absolutely. I think because I know I'm looking at the time. I know we have to start wrapping up here.
Yeah.
We've also been on for a while, so
Yeah.
I think what we'll have to do next time for an evening show, I'll pull up the Puckpedia and we'll come up with our lineup and we'll talk it out because yeah, I think there's a lot that and again for the sake of the show, this is great because there's a lot that we agree on, but sometimes we disagree on how we're getting there.
Right.
And Kevin says I think O'Brien will be a better player than Eklund at the top level. Here's the question, Kevin.
But
Regardless of
they're
who's the
all
better player,
centers.
but
They're all
here's the other
centers.
thing. It's not about getting the Connor McDavid of the draft. It's about getting the guy who's going to help you win a cup. Whether it's 2025, 26, or 26, 27, your aim is for the cup. Because guess what? I can almost promise you that every single fan of the Edmonton Oilers, if they were guaranteed a Stanley Cup, would trade Connor McDavid. If you said, think about this. How many fans, you remember 04, how many fans were upset when Nomar got traded?
Oh, yeah. There
How
were a
many
lot
are
of
upset
fans.
now that they won?
Right. Right. Well, it's the
So,
same thing. Hindsight's always different. You know what I mean? Hindsight is always
absolutely.
different. Always different.
Absolutely. But that's what I'm saying is it's not about looking at a player going, this is the best player available. We have to take him. It's this is the best player who's available and will help us win and
Right.
accomplish the championship. That and is key. And Kevin, if you think that's O'Brien, I'm that's fine. I'm not disagreeing with you. Depending on who else is on the board, because you're asking who are they going to pick. Well, I got to know who's available. Who are the 6 players taken
Right.
ahead of them? Because
Right.
are you going to go with Jake O'Brien if Porter Martone is on the board?
Right.
Last year, did anybody? Even Beckett Seneke didn't expect to be drafted 3rd overall. He literally looked around the draft board and went, holy shit, they picked me. So you're speculatively, sure, it's a great answer. I'm with you. If he's the one who's best available to do that, yes. But what are those others? For all we know, Tampa Bay trades Isaac Howard and they package him with Brandon Hagel and they get the pick from Utah. Like, who the hell knows?
Right. Yeah.
Honestly,
I
if I'm
mean,
Tampa Bay, that's something I might consider doing.
yeah, I
Getting
mean, if
getting that
if
pick
any
and
of
a
those
few other things out of Utah.
Kevin, you're 100% right. They're gonna pick the best possible player at 7, but again, it depends on what the board still looks like. If Jake O'Brien is there before Eklund, then yes, I'm saying Eklund over some of the other players, over some other centers, because I just think Eklund's gonna give you more scoring potential than some of them. But if it's such a, you know, the draft is such a crapshoot as well.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It um yeah. Anyway, we'll have to pick this up. We'll have to talk more about the head coaching search as well.
Oh, yeah.
We barely touched on that. We talked about who wasn't their coach, but not who we want to be their coach.
Yeah.
um, and I know I've got to go take care of a few things. I know you've got your work to go work on. So
Yeah, I have my shift soon.
we'll have to pick this up before. This is why I would do it week. I would do shows every night if it was up to me, but real life and work is a thing for people. So we'll figure out the next time we can do this. But Kevin, in case you missed it, Gayle is on the show. We'll put full time in air quotes just because you know this isn't either of our full time jobs, but she is officially second chair, if we call it, or equal chair, um, taking over for Dom for now. Dom knows that his spot is always here when he's ready to come back. We will pleasantly welcome him back. But for now, Gayle, thank you so much for taking over, and I look forward to many more of these very quick yet long conversations because like you, I welcome the open debate and the conversation, and we'll have it with anyone.
Yeah.
And I would put it out there that if anyone wants to join, we're open to having people come on as guests. So
Kevin, 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 Kevin.
she said it, not me. But yeah, I mean, if people want to join in on the fun and bring their opinions to video/audio airing, I'm open to having people participate. I think it'll make things more fun. And like I said, next time we sit down, we'll break out the Puckpedia. What do you
Yeah,
think?
we gotta do some sort of round table at some point.
Yes, absolutely. By the way, nice job
I've
with Ian
argued
the other
with you
day.
in the past, Kevin.
Nice job on low qual with Ian
Oh, thank you.
on that. We got to get through some of our own grades and stuff like that. I'm working on my own, so I'm grading on mine, front office, the defenseman, and so on and so forth. Once all that's out, then we'll
Mhm.
let you respond on the air.
Sounds good.
So, any final thoughts? Remind people where they can find your work as you do still currently have the inside edge than from most of us.
Yep. So on Twitter, it's at Gayle_Triani, like it says next to my name under my picture. And you can find me still at Nesson.com. And I'm on everywhere else. I just really post mostly on Twitter still, and I still call it Twitter because that's what it is. And then Nesson.com, and there'll be more announcements to come, but for now, we'll just leave it at that.
Sounds good. And in the meantime, go bees.
Go be